another public site walk at some point later in the year. I thought that the site walk that occurred last year was very fruitful, really helpful to bring the various volunteers and staff members together at the same place at the same time to talk about stuff. We are going to undertake a site walk in Concord Center next month. And so my hope is that we'll be able to schedule a follow-up site walk. So my request of you guys is that we stay in good communication so that we can coordinate your posting of a site walk at the same time as our posting of a site walk.
When would you recommend it happen?
I'm thinking it would be in June or July, so during good weather. But that's dependent on the availability of staff, availability of members of the various committees, that type of thing. So our first site walk is most likely going to be in April in Concord Center. And then we've got just too many other things happening in May to schedule another one. So next opportunity would be June. And we would need to discuss amongst ourselves a schedule, and then we can reach out and try to coordinate.
Okay, well, do you want to say then tentatively that we'd be interested in doing a June site walk if you can?
Yeah, just pin it up there as a tentative, and then we can hopefully coordinate.
What do you think, John? Is that okay?
Sounds great. And if you need any more support for or discussion about priorities, or if you need support in helping to find funding, we're happy to help with those kinds of things.
That would be great. And if you folks do not have easy access to the Complete Streets priority list that was created as part of the Complete Streets process, it is posted on the town website, but I can certainly get you a copy of that if that's helpful.
Great. Any other comments or questions from the committee? We're going to move along. This is helpful, Phil. So thank you for joining, and we'll have that June site walk in the plan, and then that we're here to help you as much as we can.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil, for coming.
You're welcome.
So next on the agenda, we've got a presentation. This is on 166 Comm Ave. And Thomas Falwell sent along some material that was then forwarded to the committee. Thomas Falwell, did you want to?
Yeah, I can. We appreciate the opportunity to meet with the committee this evening to discuss the present plans for 166 Comm Ave. I'm Tom Falwell. I'm with the firm at Coleman's and Newbury at Damon Mill Square. Where we act as counsel for Harris Partners LLC, who have the property at 166 Commonwealth under agreement, the purchase and sale agreement with the current owners. We are here this evening to share the applicant's plans for the redevelopment of the gas station and vehicle repair and service facility that's been on the site for as long as anybody, at least as long as I can remember, and probably most everyone else. I know the proposed floor plans, site plan, and a couple of the two key elevations have been posted on the committee's website, and hope that you might have had an opportunity to take a quick look at them. In summary form, the proposal is to remove the current service station building and underground fuel tanks and associated apparatus with those, and replace it with a new combined residence business building, which is allowed as a matter of right in the district. The development team will get into the specifics of the proposed reuse of the property, but it would include under my client's plans 10 residential units on the upper floors and contain commercial uses on the ground floor. It's anticipated 8 of those 10 units would be market rate units and 2 would be affordable. After we go through the process with your committee and the planning board, the next step for us will be ultimately to submit an application to the ZBA for special permit for site plan review and relief from parking and parking design standards. We've had productive meetings with the planning department with input from relevant town staff, including engineering, fire, water and sewer, police and natural resources. And the plans to be presented to you this evening are the results of those meetings and the valuable input we received from the town staff. So without further delay, let me introduce the project team, if I might. On Zoom call this evening for Aris Partners is Anthony Gagliardi, who will, I think, lead the presentation for Aris, and then Concord residents and members of the LLC, Tom Sibley and John Garofalo. The project engineer and designer for the proposed building is Spruhan Engineering out of Newton. Pellin Sevgi is here from Spruhan. She is a member of the architectural design team at Spruhan, and I believe that one staff engineer might be on the call as well. I'll let Anthony introduce him if that's the case. So with that, I'm happy to turn things over to Anthony Gagliardi to start the presentation, and we can answer any questions, hopefully, that come up in that process. I'm believing Anthony's on the call, is he?
Yes, he is. Anthony, if you want to unmute yourself.
Tom Sibley, I'm partners with Anthony. I have sent him a note to unmute himself. So hopefully he is, Pelani, are you able to hear?
Yes.
Can you guys hear me now?
There you are.
All right, sorry about that. I thought I did it 3 times, but I guess I did. Yes, good evening, everybody. Tom, thanks for that. Yeah, so you did the introductions. I think Guillermo is also from our civil engineering team. Basically, we've, as Tom said, we've had several meetings with the planning board and many other boards in town to try and get a lot of valuable input from everyone to try and get this looking the way everyone wants it to look, with keeping our goals in mind and what we have to have done as well on the site for us to move forward with it. So I think we tried to keep there was a lot of emphasis on the design and making it fit within the neighborhood and within the guidelines. So I think Palin did a really nice job with that. I'm sure you guys have had a chance to look at it, and we're open to discussion on the board about any other comments that you guys have based on what you see.
Anthony, can you share the plans, or can Marsha put them on the screen?
I can't. I'm on the road.
I can
Dana,
do
can
that.
you share them?
I can share it.
Thank you, Marsha.
Sure.
Make sure I've got them. There. Okay. Just give me a minute. That's the site plan.
Palin, do you want to take us through what you've done with these?
Sure. Do you hear me, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Good evening. And thank you for your suggestions and recommendations for the bike and pedestrian safety within the West Concord area. So our actually aim was to utilize the riverfront area. We wanted to take advantage from that water element on the site. And also, as you can see, that there is a purple dash line that represent the existing pedestrian pathway, which is not very utilized, but even though it's not very utilized, it's very it's always like it's usable for the pedestrians. And there's an existing bakery and outdoors tables, and I've been there even though I'm not from Concord, so I wanted to experience the site. And it was like very nice to sit on that tables, even though they're like, as I said, it wasn't very utilized. So our aim was to extend and expand that existing pedestrian path and maybe add more utilized green area, maybe the local botanics, and it will also respond to the local habitats. And also we wanted to like incorporate that idea with the front side of this Commonwealth Avenue. So we wanted to like create a green band between the roadway and the site. And as you can see that the neighbor's parking lot is on the upper right side of the page. So we wanted to have our parking lots right next to it. And the building in between with the between the green area and the parking lot, so to create the connection between the users who will come with their car and also like people walking by from the sidewalk. And also like if you can see that there is a biking lane in the parking lots, which also like access to the entrance space of the residential area. And it's all accessible for wheelchair and everybody as well. And also we didn't design additional biking area along this Commonwealth Avenue. And so we thought maybe we will take advantage from the sidewalk, but if it needs to be extended, as you suggested on your meeting, we are open to any idea. So we proposed like indoor biking storage area and outdoor biking storage areas. And there is that restaurant area on the left side of the building, which is like in connection with the green area. And we also designed a patio that everyone can come and everyone can take advantage from that utilized riverfront area. Those are our like main ideas about designing the site, and hope you can give some suggestions and recommendations to make this better.
Thanks. Questions, comments from the committee? If you could raise your hand if you have a question or comment. Sorry, and Palin, were you finished? It sounded like you were finished, but maybe not. Let me know.
There
Yeah,
are also,
Karna.
I was going to say there are elevations of the what the building looks like in the upper levels. So I don't know if you want me to
Correct.
proceed with those.
Yeah, we need to see that. We need to see that.
Right.
Yes.
So this is the first floor plan that we are gonna have 5 units.
Oh, well, this is the
Yeah, this is the first floor and the other one is the second floor plan. We are gonna have 5 units on this floor, and on the third floor, we are gonna have a common area and also 5 units as well. Correct. So on the roof, we are thinking about having a roof deck at on the left corner of the building, which is like this green area side, so we can overlook to the river, and also there is a river continues across the road, so it's also a very green area. So we thought that this is like the best area to have the roof deck. And also we are thinking about green roof and solar panels in terms of sustainability. And this is kind of the front elevation from the Commonwealth Avenue. So we kind of wanted to use the shapes and forms that's been using in West Concord and in Concord in general. So we are thinking about using like brick and siding materials, which will be in harmony with the neighbor buildings. And the other elevation is from the front entry from the parking lot. If you can please scroll down a little bit. Yeah,
This one.
so this is the main entrance of the residential portion. And this is the parking area and a small green space in front of the building. And also this is the riverfront side and this is parking lot side. We are thinking about the flat roof, as I said, roof deck, green roof if possible, and solar panels. I think that's it. If you have any questions, comments.
Great. And I hope everybody got a chance to review that ahead of the meeting as well. But do we have questions or comments from the committee? Laura, go for it.
Hi, this looks like a great plan. My only question, and I'm assuming like you haven't thought or there's been no discussion about actual tenants for the retail space. My only concern with the gym yoga space is that there are two gyms right there. There's Pure Barre and there's Orange Theory, and there's been a yoga or Pilates place right across the street, and I would hate to have like more open or unused retail space. And I was just wondering if there's any other way that space could be used or that you were thinking it could be used.
We will consider, we will think about that. If you have any suggestions, will be great. You know Concord better than I do, I guess. But it needs what Concord needs.
Anthony, did you have a comment?
Well, yeah, I was just saying it's going to be a, you know, we're open to retail there. It doesn't have to be yoga, it doesn't have to be fitness. It could be a small shop. Yeah, this is all really stage. That would, as opposed to a restaurant space, it would be some sort of retail use. It would be.
So we're losing Anthony, but I think
Yeah, I think-
the gist of it is that it doesn't have to be yoga.
It doesn't have to
more
be.
of an
Yeah,
open-
So
yeah,
with the
it doesn't have
permits,
to
it could be a lot. It could be a lot of different things. Okay, I just wanted
Right.
to make sure.
Correct. Yeah, that's,
it
I
was
would, I
just
would
the
look at that
inside.
more as a merchandising plan than anything else at this point.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the committee? Susan?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So I had two things. One was, I was wondering if you had considered any other designs that would enable you to put parking like underneath the building or somewhere that would make it such that we didn't have like all of that parking, like your buildings parking, then plus the Neshoba Bakery parking, like all fronting on Com Ave in the middle of our business district. It just seems a little bit less hospitable than you would hope for that area. And then my second question was just related to the green roof. I wasn't sure if you meant that there would actually be like green plants growing on the roof, or you'd be like harvesting a garden up there or something, but I was intrigued by that idea and wanted to know more.
With regard to parking underneath, you know, we've had to shrink the footprint a lot to meet the riverfront, to meet other sort of constraints. So I think we kind of lose too much footprint of usable space within the building to be able to do that. We had originally had some under there, but it became an issue with the dumpster and being able to empty the dumpster, so we had to move out front.
One of the original iterations of the plan, as Anthony said, did have parking underneath the building, which was cantilevered in portions, but that resulted during our discussions with the planning staff and so forth, with identifying a myriad of other problems that caused, and also trying to align the parking for the engineering department's recommendation. So this is the plan that seems to work best given the constraints of the site and the shrinkage of the building that we've had to endure. So we did look at that. That was one of the early go-rounds on it, but it wasn't a workable solution because of, there were other issues that it caused.
So was it at the planning board that idea died, or was it at another town?
But we
resource?
had
I'm
we
just
had
wondering.
a Zoom call with town staff and the planning department, not the planning board, and with town staff, various departments, and went through these iterations. And this is the result of the input that we got in trying to mesh all of these constraints together into a plan that was workable and also met the requirements, as Anthony said, for economics.
Part of the rooftop garden, definitely.
Oh, it's a little hard to hear.
Yeah, Anthony, we're kind of losing you.
Maybe Pellin could expand on that, answer that question.
So this is actually just the initial idea. We haven't get into the details yet, but we are open to any idea, like maybe a garden can be a good idea in Concord, or just the green roof to collect water. So we will discuss this with Anthony further.
Okay, Anne, did you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I think to follow up with what Susan just said, it's really important that you guys see the plans that Patrick Cleary right next door to you is doing, camouflaging the parking. You need to look at his plans. Your building is in the center of a cultural district. So in the way that Pellin described how you're enhancing that beautiful walk that is ignored right now, right along the river, we want the whole place to feel enhanced and not to feel like a car park for a used car place. That's not how we want people to feel when they walk into the historic Concord Junction. And so what's happened is Patrick Cleary is using that to hide what they're doing is they're basically putting 2 layers of housing on top of parking, and you won't see the parking from the street. So you should look at his plan if you're building, it's a plan that's in process. It's not approved yet, but it's in process. So he's using a different theory that you are right next door. You guys
he's not actually right next door, I think, isn't he? There's a intervening land that's part of 152 Commonwealth that's between his site and our site.
That's
well,
correct.
it's
That is
from
correct.
a pedestrian perspective,
No.
it's next door.
I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
that.
but it is next door. So we want to make it super walkable. And I do study the neuroscience of architecture, and the human brain goes on high vigilance when it sees parking. When it sees traditional architecture, it does not. It subliminally attaches to it. Okay. So I think you need to really look at that. We can't have one in the same block, one people hiding the parking lot, the next lot not. So something's not right.
Well, they're different sites and they have different constraints.
It's a lot bigger site.
Well, it's just something you might want to think about.
Well,
Okay.
we did, and we talked about having some structured parking. But as I alluded to before, that what just wasn't workable because it caused many other problems that couldn't solve that way. So as it is, we're the amount of parking we have is requiring relief from parking. It's actually requires many more spaces than that. But all things being equal, we'd rather have less parking, as you say. But it's the constraints of the zoning bylaw.
That's at the crux of the matter right there. And we're trying to work with the town and get an approved permittable project here. And trust me when I say we would rather not have all of that black space either and reduce it as much as possible. The iteration you're seeing is from strong guidance, I guess is the way that I'll word that, from the different various factions in the town. We hear you, and on the architecture, we absolutely are trying to draft off of Patrick Cleary's designs and all that we have seen in that stretch. And I think we have some idea of what you folks would prefer, and we are absolutely trying to adhere to that, and are willing to talk about that further as well. Unfortunately, on the parking, I don't know that there's going to be much that we can do about it, especially when we have the commercial space and there's going to be trash, that we need to just make sure we have accounted for, and we're able to easily remove it and place it. And there are many issues that have popped up over the different iterations of this plan. I just think it's important that we have considered all that and hear you loud and clear.
Thanks. Barbara.
So kind of related, the pictures are down now at this point, but where are you anticipating there will be entrances and exits? Going up toward the prison on Commonwealth before you go over the brook, or on the other side, closer to the other area that we're talking about? And the main reason is that's a nasty corner as it is. And the idea of increasing traffic coming in and out of that area will be a challenge no matter what we do. So I'm just curious about what you're thinking about entrances and exits.
Can I share my screen to show the plan again?
While she's doing that, 10 minutes, and I'm going to reserve 5 minutes to go over a couple of administrative items at the end. So we have 10 minutes left, so you got 5 minutes here on this agenda item.
Okay, so this is what engineering department gave us. So the yellow lines you're seeing is the current lot lines and curb lines, and they suggested extending the curb here and adding the crosswalks over here. So they suggested us entering the lots on this corner, and we have tried that option. So we tried to enter, like have the parking entrance from this corner, but we had to like bring the parking lot like this and lost some spaces here. And then we decided to have the parking entrance. I'll show the other drawing. 1 second. And at the end, so we decided to bring it up here to have more parking spots, because what town is requiring is having as much as parking spots we can have. But we are open to like having this area and extending the green area along this edge, only the parking entrance maybe, but as we said, we have to like consider the other regulations. If the town like gives us permission to do that, we are open to do that, but we are all depending your comments and also their comments. So we are trying to find the balance between your comments and their comments. So the exits and entrance will be here for the vehicles.
Yeah, I'll just give my comment to sort of follow up Susan and Ann. It sounds like you guys are balancing a number of design sort of requirements and inputs on this piece. I think the community members recognize this plot of land right now as this sort of sprawling parking lot is very unattractive, and then a building at the end that's a garage. And I think that there's it sounds like the comments are kind of about the desire to get rid of that parking lot. Now, I don't know that you can do that, but maybe there's some creative way to make it a little less of an eyesore. And I'm not an architect, but if you had, from the elevation, it looks like the facade's very nice to look at, and it does mesh well with the 13B concept and some of the design guidelines that we've got. Is there a way to use that facade kind of along more of the property and move some of the parking sort of out of sight? I think that would be, from what I'm hearing, that might be more attractive to the community.
Yes, and we also have another problem. Yeah, go ahead.
If you notice, the lot is very odd shaped. I mean, if we had the building all along the front and parking in the back. I mean, we'd have, the building would be 20 feet wide. Just, again, there's just a lot of constraints on this site that's making it very difficult to, and I get what you're saying. It's, you don't want to see all these cars, but it's just the shape of the lot really is prohibitive with a lot of things we can do with the parking, fortunately.
And I see you have your hand up, but Phil has from
Phil
the,
first, go Phil,
yeah, Phil from the public, I'd like to hear.
go Phil.
So thank you for showing us the sort of larger perspective. And I was hoping you could put that back up on the screen for a second. That's the slide that shows where this lot sits in the vicinity of Commonwealth Avenue and the square. I want to reiterate the concern that I think Barbara Morse raised with regard to this corner. There's a safety issue, I think, that's raised because of the way that cars come around Commonwealth Avenue from the sort of village part heading towards the prison part. So they're heading east at that point in time, north and west, excuse me, at that point in time. So I realize that there's a lot of competing issues with regard to this entrance and this parking consideration, and I don't want to get too far into that. I understand it's complex and you have a tough time and you'll have a lot of input on it. What I was hoping to focus on was the crosswalk that you folks have proposed, which is running from the site to the other side. Yep, right there, that one. A couple of things that I think are important to consider as you think about this. The first thing is this particular spot presents, in my lay opinion, a safety matter, and I'm hoping that you're working with the town engineer to address how to address the safety issue. The other issue that's presented is that the stretch of bricked sidewalk, which is to the west of your two crosswalks, is not ADA accessible for someone in a wheelchair. And we saw in the WCAC slides earlier, my neighbor who's in a motorized wheelchair actually in the road because that's the only way that he can navigate getting from where we live over to the village. So it's conceivable to me that the brickwork would need to be removed. That's one alternative. The other alternative is to encourage people to cross the street and go on the south side of the street. But main thing I think for you folks to just be cognizant of is that that is a very tough intersection, both right where the vehicle is and also on the other side of Kenneth Dunn Square, because people tend to roll through that curve without stopping. So something to talk with the town engineer about how to potentially remediate that while you're doing some other work.
We did have conversation with them about that. That's where this all came about.
And what was their, I'm curious, what was their suggestion with regard to addressing the safety issue?
Well, they kind of gave us the guidance on these crosswalks, if I recall.
Okay, and what additional infrastructure, signage, work, et cetera, did they propose?
We didn't get into that specific.
Okay, so my ask.
But we are in communication with them. I just
Yeah,
want to make
my
that
ask
clear.
would be to take another crack at it with town engineer and his staff, because a crosswalk is great. I'm glad to see that there's a crosswalk now, but more is needed, I think, to make that intersection safe.
Mhm.
Understood.
Thank you.
All right, we have a lot of hands up, so we're gonna keep going. Cynthia, do you mind stating your name and address, or full name and address?
Sure, but it's gonna be my
Yeah,
husband talking.
Yeah, we're both using the same computer. So this is Dan Stapleton from 20 Conant Street, which is quite close to the locations. Just a comment and well, two comments and a question. One comment is about that riverfront trail, and the architect indicated that it's very underused. I just want to point out that it's actually fairly well used. And in the context of the crosswalks and how that functions, the bakery now has moved all their customer entrances to the riverside. So the only way you can get there really is off of the riverfront walk. So, and right now, a lot of people cut through between Neshoba Brook building and the gas station, that little gap there. So you just need to anticipate that kind of pedestrian issue when you're kind of doing your layout, because it is fairly well used right now. You can just trust me. I'm there all the time on that, and it's going to probably become more complicated with the bakery relocating their entrances. A question about, that's my comment. My second comment is on the aesthetics of the building. And I know that's early, but I do, just as a citizen here and someone who lives here, really appreciate the incredible effort that's gone into the that other project, Patrick Cleary, in terms of, the development of the aesthetics. And I think that's a process that actually started with the Concord Outfitters building, basically. And these are so close together, all these three projects, that, it'd really be a lost opportunity if you didn't kind of follow that lead and think about that. So I'm just throwing that out there. My question is about the parking and not so much, whether you can do one at grade below the building parking, but just the parking in general, in that I think you have 10 residential units and you have some additional commercial space. So my question is, does this require off-street parking for to occupy all of those residential units, as well as what you anticipate for the commercial space? And I think that's pretty much all I have.
Yeah, so the
We're gonna
question,
need relief.
go ahead.
We're gonna need relief on parking, so that's.
Well, I just will follow up on what a contentious issue that already is. And it's a very challenging, I will say I am an engineer, so I'm not totally speaking as a layman with regard to the traffic around that intersection. And if you just keep adding parking there, it's just going to get worse and worse. So, I don't know, it comes up every time we have a development, but it does not get better. We just continue to pack more into that very small space.
Ann, did you have a question? Thank you. And I didn't catch your first name.
Daniel.
Dan Katz. So thank you, Dan.
It's actually Stapleton, but it's a common mistake. So
let's go to Ann. Back to Ann.
I'll just be really quick. I just to follow up on what Dan Stapleton said, I think it's really important to really look at Concord Outfitters, look at the new Patrick Cleary building and design with looking at their drawings. So it fits in like
Can I ask what building is that? Is it the big residential building on the other side?
13B.
Sorry?
She's talking about 13B. It's a
13B, okay.
It's huge. You should definitely look at those plans and then look at the carefulness, the way they really carefully put together Concord Outfitters. It really works. It doesn't look like a new building. It's like 3 years old. It's amazing what they did. We want that same quantity, that same sense of quality here. We need that. That's what we're about. The other thing I did want to say is I am a little confused about the parking, because from what I heard in the town, and this is where I just don't know, and I'll stop talking about it, but I heard that we're talking about reducing parking minimums. In some cities and towns, they've made them 0. So to see so much parking spewing out here, I'm just a little confused about it because I thought there was a movement to reduce minimums. So anyway, that's it. But I think you really do need to look at that. And I think it'll be hard for us to support this project unless we see a better addressing of the parking issue.
Just to follow up on that comment about the parking requirement, and I don't know, you have a different mix maybe of residential, commercial space, but there are sort of high level conversations about how the village is a walkable space and it's near public transport. And a lot of people who are, it's walkable, not just in the village, but from the residential areas. And so there's some sort of concepts about, do you really need a lot of parking, even for commercial space? Because are people really going to be driving and then parking? That's kind of the concept there.
So if I could just jump in on that, and I appreciate that this is Tom Sibley. We recognize that this is a transit-oriented site, and we are absolutely banking on what you just said, and our plans, I think, kind of speak to that, and our conversations certainly with the town officials, and that's been a prevalent point. I want to make sure, because there's been several comments so far tonight that says that we just urge you to address it or look into it. I promise you all, folks, we have almost ad nauseum on all of these things. We have looked into all these things. We're very familiar and are trying to draft exactly on Patrick Cleary's design of his building. We're fairly well versed on all of that. I know him personally, and the importance to this particular committee, but also us, and we're townsfolk. We own another building in West Village and a restaurant, and our office is there. We're completely on the same page, but we are, to the extent that you can be helpful with the folks that are going to ultimately hand us our permits, we would appreciate it, because we are addressing the same issues. And I won't go to as far as saying fighting the same battles, but I think it goes without saying that we're aware of these issues and we're aligned with you on most, if not all of them. But we do have to make this work, unfortunately, in terms of the X's and O's, and we're making really great efforts to do so. And this is the culmination of a lot of hours of design and meetings and guidance and all of that. So I just want you folks to understand that none of these stones that you brought up have been left unturned, and we can continue to push back on some of them, but we hear you, and we would love to have them say zero parking. We understand it not to be reality, even though it is a transit oriented site.
Laura, go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to express that I am much less concerned about how the parking looks. And I think that nothing could look worse than what it is now. And so this project is like such a drastic improvement that I don't think the parking is an issue. Woods Hill Table is one of the nicest buildings, and there's a huge parking lot right next to it. I just don't think it's going to be that big of a deal, and we should look at like the bigger picture of moving this project forward, even if there will be parking along the side. I think it's going to make such a drastic improvement that we have to weigh the costs of trying to kind of redo it to make it perfect when it may not be able to be.
Thanks, Laura. And Jeff, could you state your name and address?
Sure, Jeff Collins, 55 Highland Street. I wonder if there's any opportunity to collaborate with owners of the Shoverbrook Bakery building on a green strip, maybe a couple trees in there to break up that relatively vast swath of parking. I appreciate the applicant's interest in reducing parking. I also wonder if the apartments will come with rights to a parking spot, or if there'll be sort of zero assigned parking, given the transit-oriented nature, that would maybe help reduce the parking required for the site. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. So I'm happy to jump in on the collaboration. We have had many conversations with John Gates and his partner on collaborating in many different ways. I'm sure they are going to continue. And, we've become quite friendly and are in support of one another on our project and on their ongoing project. And so, I have no doubt that we're going to be working together to make that entire area more aesthetic and usable for everyone.
And then I think that he had a question about the like parking allocation to the units as well.
So
Yeah, well, I don't think we're there yet with that.
yeah, that's so some of this is, again, we're subject to a higher being on a lot of this, and we are we're trying to appease the masses here, and so I think we're going to whittle down into a project that's doable for everyone here, and that's what, at that point, we'll be able to say, no, we don't have to provide a parking spot for each unit, and or yes, unfortunately we do, and so that's still to be determined, I guess.
Some of those are market-driven considerations as well, obviously.
Okay. I don't see any other hands raised. Any last comments or questions on the, so Tom, what do you sort of, Tom or Jeff, or I guess there are two Toms, Tom Sibley or Tom Falwell? What are you thinking about process here?
Well, ideally, we'd like to have to meet again, but I mean, we're most of what you brought up, as Tom and Anthony have mentioned, have been iterations and considerations that we've struggled with in the process and getting to where we are now. Like, for instance, with the engineering and the entrance and so forth, those are results of input from the engineering department at the town and so forth. So we've pretty much, I mean, it's not to say that there can't be some tweaks to it, but we've pretty much run the gamut, as Tom Sibley said, of with the discussions with John Gates and company, and all of the discussions with the town planning staff and the various departments as to how we could possibly make this site work given all of the constraints. And this is what we've come up with. We were interested, obviously, in comments with respect to the materials, the building, and so forth. So we'd ideally like to get whatever other input or questions that you have, and see if we can't come back and arrive at a confluence of design that we can then get your support on and go to the planning board and ultimately to the zoning board of appeals once that happens.
Great. I think that sounds reasonable. And it just is I guess this is my comment, sort of a detail, but if you're going to present a revision on another meeting, maybe be prepared to show on the facade, speak to the materials more specifically, and maybe color schemes for that. I think that would help people kind of understand how it fits in. And the more that you can show that you've considered and incorporated feedback, especially from this group, the stronger your support's going to be.
So when's your next meeting?
So we actually have our next, it's usually the first Wednesdays of the month. So our April meeting will be whatever the first April Wednesday is at 7 p.m. And if you'd like, we can reserve an agenda item for you. We do have a number of things going on. In fact, there's some things on the agenda tonight that we may not get to.
Yep. I think that we would like to do that. Do you agree, Tom? Yeah.
I do, yes.
Yes. So if you could give us a slot at the next meeting, we'll get more information on the materials and some more detail on that. And again, try to push the pencil a little bit on some of these other issues you talked about, even though unfortunately, this is not the first time we've heard this because we've gone through this parking on various iterations and various considerations when we got to this point, so.
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate that you guys are working hard. You also got to realize that WCAC is the first time we've seen this, so we're gonna.
No, I understand that.
Understood.
Right.
We didn't,
All
I
right.
didn't come here expecting you to give us a green light this evening. We're aware of the process.
Yeah, okay. So that'll be the plan. We'll put you on the agenda for April and we'll reconvene then.
Okay, thank you.
Ann, did you have a hand up?
I think I'm very confused, and I'm tell you why I'm so confused. We just had a presentation at our last meeting by Patrick Cleary specifically on how he's camouflaging parking and making it look what we want a building to look like. Then you come and it looks like you haven't seen what he did. So it's really confusing to me. And so we are about to write a letter. We've just written a letter that I hope will get approved, really supporting Patrick's work because of what he did. And now I feel like we're in a very confusing place. So I think you need to see what Patrick presented, and you need to see, maybe it'll be public, the letter that we proposed for Patrick, why we're doing it, because he's hiding parking. So I think there's some confusion here. That's all.
And it may be that his ability to do so as a result of his site and the size and shape of his site as opposed to our site. We've got a totally different animal as far as of the site constraints that doesn't allow, believe me, we would love to do what you suggested. That was one of our first go-arounds, but it just could not work. So, I mean, you have to take into consideration that our site is a unique size, shape, and doesn't offer perhaps the same ability to do what you're talking about as Patrick's site does, much as we'd like to.
Susan.
Real quick, is there someone that we can talk to at the town to better understand the constraints of the property? I think I trust that what you're saying is probably accurate, but I also would love to hear, like, specifically what are the trade-offs that are requiring the parking?
Constraints of the property in what fashion? I'm not sure what you're talking about. I'm talking about the physical constraints of the size of the property and the dimensions and the long and narrow, and you know, if you look at the lot, it's not a square, it's not a rectangle, it's a difficult site to work with, and the aim here is to try to improve it to the extent that we can to get rid of what's there now, which is, I think everyone agrees, is not an ideal situation. We're trying to do that, and unfortunately, because of the nature of the site, there are certain things that we wish we could do, but we simply can't just because of the way that the site is configured.
Yeah. So Susan, I think just to add on to that in a more specific way and loop something that Anthony said about 10 minutes ago, and it might shed some more light, and specifically the constraints of the shape is such that Anthony alluded to, well, we would, if we did X, we would only have a 20-foot wide building. And really what that means, what that boils down to is we wouldn't be able to get the size of the building we need to get on to make the deal work. And so I think that's as simply stated as we can say it. And then you just have a fence around an old gas station for a couple of decades. So we're trying to make it all work. And we think we're close, and we're willing to hear and adhere to your guidelines further, and we'll continue to work to do so. And if I might sort of offer, Susan, are you kind of thinking as far, because it seems like the puzzle is about the entrance, right? And because the entrance is kind of dictating where the parking goes.
That and then I'm like seeing again that once again, like, development in West Concord is being shaped because of parking requirements, which seems bizarre to me. I just want to make that observation. Yeah.
It's not just the parking requirements, it's also the wetlands and riverfront. They have constraints in terms of what they can do in the riverfront, even though it's already been disrupted in some way. the Natural Resources Commission is looking for improvements along the riverfront. And so what they have proposed in terms of access to the site, in terms of their entrances and so forth, is respectful of the wetlands and riverfront areas of that parcel. Also, the depth of the parcel is nowhere near as wide as what Patrick Cleary has to work with. He has a full 60-foot wide parking lot behind his building. This site does not lend itself to that that type of layout. So those are the two major constraints, are the shape and depth of the lot and the wetlands and riverfront areas.
Thank you for that. That's exactly right. And the entrance was dictated solely by engineering and wetlands. And that's why you see an eliminated curb cut on that Commonwealth Ave side. And again, that's not us. That was dictated to us.
And so just to be clear, the entrance couldn't be sort of like where the yoga building is.
No.
And that's just dictated by town engineering. Nicole? You're on mute. You're still on mute.
So I've been here 20 years. My kids have walked those behind the bakery a lot and fed the ducks there and whatnot. So I can't imagine a whole lot of people who are in the community know how to get back there. So the fact that you're using that little strip as an example of access to get back to towards the brook is minimal, in my opinion. And I'm sorry that sounds harsh. There's not a whole lot of people there's some people who walk along Commonwealth from the prison, but the most thing that I am concerned about is the traffic jam that you will get going left into the parking lot on Commonwealth, because already that whole section of Commonwealth during 2:45 to 3 o'clock to 5:30 is very, very busy. And if you're proposing a restaurant there, where will all the patrons park?
Sorry. Again, I would look at that as a merchandising plan, and we have no plans for the commercial space and specific tenancy for those. Again, the addition of the commercial space in that building is solely town mandated. So that's not that wasn't our development team. Hey, let's add some commercial space here. That's not the case. So again, we're trying to play by the bylaws and the rules and again have appease the masses and have a permittable project here. We don't know if that'll be a hair salon or a takeout restaurant or we just don't know that, and some of that is going to be dictated by the parking and you know the way retail spaces work is if you're going to have retail, certain uses need a certain amount of park. And so it may be they say you can't have X, you can't have Y. We're prepared to have that conversation.
Planning board's been pushing for more retail space on the first floor, so we've been pushing back on that due to the parking.
Could you say that again, Tom? What
I think it was Anthony. Is it?
Yeah, can you say that for him? Because it was
The
muffled.
planning board's been, the planning board has been pushing us for more retail space on the first floor.
Yeah,
Or
for-
so-
so
Actually,
in case you,
that
yeah,
yoga and gym that was just recently added based on our last meeting with them. They've been pushing for more retail space.
Right. We don't allow pure residential development in the village district, and that is the village district. That's the zoning. It's intended to be commercial space on the first floor. So that they're trying to meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw, given that they're in the West Concord, if not the West Concord Village, the West Concord Business District.
correct.
Got it. Nicole,
And
did you?
sorry,
Go
just
ahead, Tom.
I just wanted to address Nicole's first point, if I could, for half a second here, which is just we understand that back area is already being utilized as a cut through and a walking path into the bakery and from behind. we intend to improve that significantly. Aesthetically, usability, all of it. I understand that there's an access road back there, or a way to walk through the concrete rotted out jungle that it is now, but what will be back there and what's planned to be back there is, I think it would be hard for anyone to look at and say this isn't a vast improvement.
Plus the fact that the use of it now, and I'm not using the word trespass in the legal sense, that the use of that is not as a matter of right. And we presumably the part of the process here would be the public access easement that would enable people to lawfully use it, which, you know, if somebody put up a fence tomorrow, they wouldn't be able to do it. Wouldn't I? So that's, you know, that's part of the process in terms of providing that in legalizing it as well, if I put my lawyer hat on.
So Tom, just to clarify, you're getting a public easement on that walkthrough?
Well, my presumption is if there's going to be as part of the plan that's going to allow public access, it would be something we will be asked to memorialize.
Yeah. Okay, so we are way over time, but there's been a lot of comments and questions. And so we have one more public hand up, and I want to take that, and then I think we're going to have to adjourn after that. So Nancy Teasdale, could you please state your address? Yeah, you're on mute. Nancy, you got your hand up. Going once, going twice. There she is. Nancy? Nancy Teasdale. Okay, so I think we're going to move on. So I think a lot of comments, questions. Thank you everybody for that, and we'll have this on the agenda for the April meeting, and then we'll reconvene on this at that time. Before we adjourn, Anne had circulated with the committee a letter of support for 13B. We're not going to go through it now, just because we're over time, but make sure to get your comments back to her directly, not as a group. So reply directly to Anne on that. And if we need to review it live, we'll try to review that on the April meeting. Otherwise, well, I think we'll have to, because we'll have to actually, I think we can approve it offline, because we moved to we voted to send a letter. So if we can all comment offline, I think we can actually go forward offline on the 13B letter. We did not get to another guest who we had, and that is Todd Benjamin. I'm not gonna keep us on here. We're 26 minutes over already. Todd, we can put you on the agenda for next month if you're on the line. Are you there, Todd?
I am, yeah. I do.
So, and if you really have something urgent, we could do another special meeting like we did last month.
Yeah, I appreciate that. As we know, this is a time-sensitive conversation as it pertains to the next iteration of Junction Village, and we're really the key is trying to get support and just trying to hear and I want to be clear, not support for a particular proposal. What's really crucial at this early stage is just hearing what the community wants to see there in terms of the type of housing and approximate number of units. And so I just want to make sure, I mean, for example, if the community were to come back and say, we'd like to see another assisted living project there, that's very important news, because that's not something that we would pursue. So that's really something important to hear. So we really are looking at just understanding what the community wants to see there. And I know in our last conversations, it was mentioned, well, what is the town, how does the family housing, for example, support the town's goals and such? And I can go through that. There's quite a lot of information from the most recent housing production plan that supports the need for family housing on that site and in other sites. And of course, it dovetails with the Concord long range plan as well. But you know, I don't want to belabor the point and go deeper into the evening. If you want me to speak to it now, happy to. But if you want to have a quick special meeting, we're happy to do that as well.
Well, it's a committee's meeting, so if the committee wants to stay on and listen to that, that is an option. Or if somebody wants to move to adjourn, I suppose we can do that too. Anybody have an opinion, Anne?
Oh, I couldn't quite get my head around that yet. I'm not sure yet about that, if I'm too tired for that at this point, but I do want to say, there's one other item we have. The Bruce Freeman Rail Trail is going to be talking about the West Concord Junction Cultural District signs. I just want to make sure you know that. Aaron McCloskey at February 28th sent me a little map which shows where the two little signs are going to go. It needs to be voted on by the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail Committee. That should be happen. We think they will consider it March 30th. I just want to know that you know that. You all saw that the signs are already designed, and I was told we can make them for $50 a piece. They'll be very small.
This is what we've been talking about for a while. It's a pretty good idea. It's, I think, based on the consensus. Barbara, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just think that the issue of time with what Todd is trying to present, if people are too tired to do it at night, but then let's schedule an additional meeting sooner rather than later. Otherwise, I think that the whole thing will go down the tubes again.
Right. I and having been on committees in town, I know what it's like to be in your shoes, to be, convening a committee and hearing all of this information from everybody. So, I can sympathize and empathize with you.
So, okay, so let me frame that a little bit. So the CHDC owns this land, and there's a suggestion that if there were support for, in general, the use and density of that plot of land, for example, 40 to 50 units of family housing, that would be helpful to moving the overall process with CHDC forward, not specific to Todd's proposal. And if we wanted to hear Todd's kind of characterization of that concept to help us make a decision, I think now would be the time to hear that.
Okay, great.
Right.
And the real issue here is really hearing the select board and other town entities really want to hear what the community wants to see at the project. So let me just step back briefly by way of introduction. Todd Benjamin, Sudbury Road, Concord resident here, been involved in affordable housing issues in the town in the past on the Concord Housing Authority, Affordable Housing Funding Committee, and other things. And so for a while, I've wanted to see a project here as well. And now that we're in a situation where the previous project has ended, there's, I believe, a real opportunity to do something to pick up where that ended and try to do something in a thoughtful but yet expeditious manner. And I know how much time something like this takes. My background is in commercial real estate, and so I'm willing to put aside other opportunities to try to make this work. So I do also have a business interest in the project. Not only, I want to see something there, but I also have a business interest because I put aside some other things to try to make something work here. So the real ask of you folks is, as John said, ideally a letter to the CHDC and a letter to the select board to say, what would you like to see there in terms of what kind of housing and approximately how many units. In terms of kind of justification for how family housing coincides with the town's goals. As I mentioned, the housing production plan that the select board just approved in December speaks to this, as does the previous housing production plan from 2015, I believe it was, as does the Concord long range plan. So just a couple of tidbits of where some of that support comes from. In the most recent housing production plan, the consultant met with 2 focus groups of community members. There were 3 public forums and there was a public survey. And based on all of that information is where really the support for family housing is coming from. So one of the housing goals, and there were several housing goals, but one of them is to achieve and maintain the state's goal under Chapter 40B, which means having the 10%, having 10% of Concord's housing being affordable. So having family housing would support that. Other types of housing admittedly would support that as well. One of the things that I think speaks directly to family housing on this site is increasing the variety of rental housing, especially for families. And that's something that is specifically called out in the housing production plan. Also, another thing called out is the need for smaller homes, which would be the case with this kind of approach. And also, I think what's very important is fostering diversity, equity, and inclusion in the community. And that's something that having affordable housing for families would speak to directly. In terms of some of the housing strategies, it's kind of been touched upon tonight, having the ability for families to walk to the commuter rail, to the transit-oriented development, to be able to walk to the local and independent businesses. And that's a key component of the housing production plan and some of the research that has come from there. One of the things that and I can send this information to you. I know there's a lot of information here, and I can send this to you. But one of the other things that is really important, and I think we're all aware of, is that younger households are becoming a smaller and smaller percentage of Concord's population. So by having a family housing approach here, that will help to welcome younger households into the community. And also, it's something that will allow people who work in Concord and work for the town, hopefully allow them an opportunity to live here as well. So how do we kind of, implement this and get things going here? Well, one thing is the Concord Municipal Affordable Housing Trust. They are the town board, if you will, that is the recipient of, or I should say probably the overseer of funds that are allocated for affordable housing. And so there is some money available there. Hopefully at the town meeting in April, they will be allocated about $2 million. And so that is a way that perhaps a project at Junction Village could get done in the short term in terms of tapping into some of that. But I think also one of the big things that we've heard about recently is MBTA communities. As we know, Concord is an MBTA community. And again, this is something in the housing production plan. The MBTA community has several criteria to meet those obligations. And one of those is that there be housing within 1/2 mile of a commuter rail station. And another is that there be no age restrictions for that housing. So by having family housing here, it could be a way to meet Concord's obligation for MBTA communities. So that's another important component. So that's just a snippet of some of the reasons that I feel that a family housing approach here supports Concord's goals as laid out in the housing production plan that was approved in December. Again, could go on and also bring in information from the long range plan, et cetera, but wanted to at least present some of that color so that you have that perspective.
Great. So comments, questions. We got Barbara. Go ahead.
Todd, maybe, or Lee, maybe it would be helpful if you would explain what the options would be for housing there, if there are any other than family housing. We know that the affordable assisted living that was planned there for a number of years got turned down, pulled out, however you want to think about it. And it clearly would have been age restricted. When we did this originally 10 years ago at CHDC, we got plans for apartment buildings, for townhouses, for affordable assisted living. That's pretty much the range that was given to us from in response to an RFP. What else would be available to put there nowadays?
Yeah, Lee, would you like to address that?
I'll just add that CHDC's plan is to gain some sense of the community as to what they'd like to see there. If there seems to be consensus on family housing or something different, then we'd probably put out an RFP to see what the development community wants to propose for that type of housing and a density attached to it. If there isn't consensus or we don't really have a solid vision in mind, then it would be a broader request for information that would really open it up to a broader section of the development community, and we just see what comes back, similar to what CHDC did 10 plus years ago, and just to revisit, what is popular now, what is economic now, and that's really the key, the economics. As your previous presenter alluded, there's a balance to make a project work, and that means X number of units for relating to development costs and a profit incentive. Developers don't build anything if they're not going to make any money, even nonprofits. So there's a balance between how many units you need to build in order to get any kind of return on an investment for a project like this. So I'll just speak for myself. I think I'd be looking for the least dense development that could be put in there for the least amount of subsidy, which is the other component of this. Is affordable housing projects always require some kind of public subsidy, and that can be like with the assisted living. It was a combination of state funding, I think federal funding through low income tax credits, and then local funding, which ultimately, by asking for additional funds, led to the demise of the project. And I'll just put it in further perspective. Even if they got that, would have been roughly $3 million. That's a pittance compared to what some other communities are putting in for far fewer units than the 83 we had proposed. So, I think it's going to be a wake up call for the town once another affordable housing projects is put forward, whether it's Todd's or any other, and what the subsidy really needs to look like. It's going to be a big number.
And thanks. And kind of to follow Barbara's question, can it not be a mix of different types of housing?
It could be, as long as they're all affordable, which is a restriction in the deed. The property was essentially donated to CHDC from the state, with the requirement that land can only be used for affordable housing and open space.
And my understanding, John, is that for an MBTA community, there can be no age restriction. So for the project to be counted for MBTA community, it can't be a 55 plus. It couldn't be assisted living. And there has to be no age restriction there. So that's my understanding of that. Lee mentioned about the number of units, and then that's certainly a key factor. The developer that I've been speaking with, who would construct it and manage it, is a nonprofit developer, and they have deep expertise in this. And their feeling is that the 40 to 50 is the smallest amount of units, for example, that would support an on-site property manager. But even more importantly, when we look at the housing production plan and we look at what would give Concord a quote unquote safe harbor, because we will be under the 10% as we get to May of 2023. What gives Concord the safe harbor is about 40 units, and that gives us safe harbor for about a year. So it does seem like the 40 to 50 units really fits several key components. To just touch briefly on Barbara's earlier question, I mean, in terms of the types of affordable housing that generally are I guess viewed upon, there's the assisted living, of course, there's family, there's 55 plus or age restricted. There can be supportive housing, which is where there's a population that lives there that also needs some kind of support. It could be like a group home kind of thing. Or like a halfway kind of a house kind of thing. And those are generally the four categories that the Department of Community Development, the state entity, will agree are meeting a community's needs towards their affordable housing obligation. And given those four, it seems like family housing is the right fit from multiple perspectives for the parcel.
And I got an echo there. Is there what is this MBTA community concept, is that something we need to comply with to get funding? Is everybody clear on that? Because it seems, because the reason I asked that is because just looking at like the community's needs, it seems to me that there is a need for more senior housing as well, especially housing that's accessible, but also family housing. So I'm just kind of trying to understand if that's a hard requirement to not have sort of an age restriction.
Yeah, Marcia is probably the person who has the most expertise in that, and it's probably best to address it. Would you mind opining on that, Marcia?
Well, the MBTA Communities Act is something that was adopted by the state. And for Concord, in our housing production plan, said that we will make an effort to look at sites and look at the zoning and look at how we might comply with that legislation. Part of the reason that we want to do it is because it makes the town eligible to consider a more stringent construction code or building code, and we want to be able to do both. So whether it's a 40B, which is the comprehensive permit that overrides local zoning, or the MBTA community zoning, we're looking at both elements, and the Junction Village site would comply with either one and move forward with either one. So it's just one more tool to provide for affordable housing. I fully agree that if we have family housing, we can have different types of family housing. I think for that particular site, we're looking at the number of bedrooms. And if we're being serious about affordable housing, for families, we need 3-bedroom units. So by having a mix of 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms, you're allowing for a diversity of your population. You're looking for people who are downsizing, or as well as people who are just starting out. They could both start with the smaller units. You're talking about families, you're talking about 3 bedrooms. So it's looking at that mix, and that's really important here. I do not agree with any concept of restricting ages or restricting housing for any particular type. I think the more diversity you have, the better community that you have.
Thanks. That helps. Seems to me that I guess the age restriction isn't really the point so much as the accessibility of the design of the housing. If it's a senior person that's downsizing, 1 floor elevators, or it's on the first floor, that kind of thing.
No, and those are great points, and obviously those are very project specific components. And please keep in mind that what we're talking about here is really the concept, is really what does the community feel they want to see there, just in terms of types and numbers. So
other comments, questions from the committee? Or the public at this point? Phil? And then we have Sue from the planning board. Everybody else has gone to bed. Oh, Nicole. Go for it. You're on mute.
I'll learn soon. Sometimes I would like it if seniors could have preferability to the first floor, because when they have to go into an elevator, it makes them feel more infirmed. And it's a bit of an identity. I'm dealing with it right now with my own mother, and going in an elevator makes seniors feel very different and enabled than just walking in on a first floor level and accessing what they need to access and being able to walk out the door.
Thanks. Thank you, Nicole. Other questions or comments? Phil, from the public.
Phil Posner, 225 at 223 Lawsbrook Road. I was also on the CHDC when the project was originally proposed, and through a certain stage of the approval of the project, What I did just now is pulled out some materials that were prepared for CHDC in connection with the project approval and sent them over to the current chair, Mr. Smith. One thing that did come up as a concern at the beginning of the project was the traffic impact of the various alternatives. And I would suggest to Mr. Benjamin that he might want to just refresh himself on that issue because it seemed to be a big deal at the time. And I would expect that it would come up again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you.
Okay, and so, last time we mentioned also infrastructure improvements are always interesting to us. And then there are points about the use of the open spaces in the prior proposal that were very interesting.
Yep.
And we're talking here about diversity of affordable housing options, some things about accessibility. Those are sort of themes. Lee, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to add that if anyone wants to hear more about the use of the site, similar to what you've heard already, we're meeting with the housing group of the League of Women Voters on Wednesday at 7 p.m. by Zoom. And I think they blocked off 90 minutes for us. So there'll be an additional opportunity to ask questions and comment. Thanks for having us.
You said Wednesday?
Wednesday at 7 by Zoom.
And that's a CHDC meeting?
It's a League of Women Voters. I'm not sure what their exact name is, but their housing committee. They are hosting myself on behalf of CHDC and Todd on behalf of the developer.
So we certainly appreciate the time, and I think as Lee mentioned, for CHDC for their next step, it's either if there's consensus around the type of project that goes there, then CHDC goes down one path. If we're not able, or if the community is not able to come to a consensus, then CHDC would go down a different path, which I think probably conservatively would add a month or two to the process. Lee can speak to the timeline, but the hope is that we can come to a consensus, whatever that consensus is, and therefore move forward more expeditiously, so we can try to get something on the going with a project of whatever it is in the short term versus the long term. So because of course, as we know, once a community goes under their 10% number, and this is called out in the housing production plan, then and it says failing to achieve such goals will open the town to so-called unfriendly 40B proposals for private developments at locations and densities not of the town's choosing. And that's, obviously we need affordable housing no matter what, but that also is a component of what we're trying to accomplish as well.
Yeah, so the crux of that from a process standpoint is if we're able to show some kind of support for a consensus, they can go to an RFP instead of an RFI. RFI would be more of a formal process to gather that kind of consensus. It would take longer. So I guess the question to the committee is, do you think that we would be able to write, and Lee, correct me if I'm wrong, but it would be a general letter of support addressed to the CHDC that would describe things about support for the use and density of the plot of land and the type of housing. This examples would be, 40 to 50 units of family housing, as well as other themes like support for the way that the open spaces will be used, maybe access to nature, maybe support for accessible design, and then support for any concepts around infrastructure improvements around the land. Does the committee think that we could write like a general letter of support to the CHDC about that to help with the process?
Yeah, I'd be in favor of that.
I would too.
So I have Ann there and also Nicole and Laura. I'd like to hear from everybody on that. Ann, what do you think?
I don't know enough. I'll heed to my betters.
Laura, do you have an opinion?
I'm in favor of it.
And Nicole?
Just don't know enough yet.
Okay, so that's kind of almost like a preview of a vote there. Well, then why don't we just move and vote? And again, this would not be a letter in support of Todd's project specifically. This would be a letter to the CHDC in support of the use of that plot of land for affordable housing. And so the motion would be move to vote to write a general letter of support to the CHDC in support of the use of the Junction Village plot of land with approximately 40 to 50 units of family housing and including accessibility design considerations and then addressing themes about open space accessibility and also infrastructure improvements related to the design. And that's the motion. So I would need a second to move forward with the vote.
Second.
All right, so let's do a vote. So Barbara?
Yes.
And we got Susan,
Yes.
Nicole.
Don't know enough yet.
So is that a no vote?
So it'd be for affordable housing only?
Yes.
It has to be, that parcel is deed restricted. It can, and anything on
Right.
that parcel must only be for affordable housing.
Okay, you got my vote for that.
You can also abstain if you would like.
Thank you, I'll do that.
Laura
Yes.
and Ann.
I'll abstain.
All right, I'm going to vote in favor of the general letter that we're describing. I think that's not unanimous vote in favor. So I need somebody to raise their hand to draft the letter. And it can't be Ann, because Ann always does it. Barbara, you're raising your hand. Ann's already got 3 letters to write. All right, so Barbara's going to draft the letter. Process there is since we voted to move forward with the letter, you can draft the letter, you can circulate it with the committee. The committee members can directly give you comments back, and then you can circulate revisions. Once you have no further comments, you can send it to the CHDC. And I suppose it can be addressed directly to Lee Smith, correct?
Sure.
All right.
As chair.
Okay. As chair, yep.
Thank you for taking the extra time tonight. I know it's late. I appreciate it.
Yeah, look at that. Well, we got a lot done. So I'm gonna move. I'm not gonna move to adjourn. We're already way over, so I just want to make sure we're not missing anything burning that we didn't get to.
I just have one quick question. Lee, would that letter to the CHDC also suffice for the select board as well?
I think if there's a CC to the select board, Marcia, unless you have a different opinion.
Okay. All right, thank you.
So we'll CC the select board. All right, now I am going to move to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any opposed to adjourning? You can oppose if you have something you really want to raise, since we're way over already. No opposition, so thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your
Bye.
time. Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.